The house loomed large, casting an eerie shadow in the moonlight. It was a rambling Victorian mansion, full of dark corners and creaking floorboards.
Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she rang the doorbell. Mrs. Carter answered, her face drawn and pale. She seemed nervous, twisting a lace handkerchief.
She practically shoved Sarah inside and shut the door with a thud. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. The house smelled musty, like old books and dust. She could hear the faint ticking of a grandfather clock. It was unnerving, like the house was watching her. Two little angels slept soundly in their beds. Sarah couldn't help but smile. Downstairs, Sarah tried to make herself comfortable. She turned on a few lamps, chasing away some of the shadows. The living room was huge, with heavy velvet curtains and antique furniture. She found a book and settled down on the plush sofa. The silence was broken only by the ticking of the clock. Sarah tried to focus on her book, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The phone rang, making her jump. She took a deep breath, telling herself it was probably just Mrs. Carter checking in. Hello? She could hear someone breathing on the other end of the line, a low, raspy sound. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest.
"Who is this?"
she demanded, her voice shaking. The voice chuckled, a chilling sound.
"Just someone who cares about the children." And then the line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her mind racing. Panic welled up inside her. She decided to check on the children. Maybe seeing their sleeping faces would calm her nerves.
The children were still sound asleep, their chests rising and falling rhythmically. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding.
"See, everything was fine. It was just a prank call."
She went back downstairs, determined to forget about the call and enjoy the rest of the evening. But the silence of the house seemed louder now, more oppressive. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains sent a jolt of fear through her. The phone rang again, the shrill sound piercing the silence like a scream. Sarah stared at it, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't want to answer it, but she knew she had to. What if it was Mrs. Carter? What if something was wrong?
"Hello?"
"Did you check on the children?"
This time there was no mistaking the menace in his tone. Fear clawed at Sarah's throat, making it impossible to speak. She hung up the phone, her hand trembling. The phone rang again and again and again. Each time Sarah let it go to voicemail, but the caller didn't leave a message. He just kept calling, each ring sending a fresh wave of terror through her. She had to call someone. She grabbed the phone with trembling hands and dialed 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Minutes later, Sarah heard the sound of sirens approaching. Relief washed over her, so strong it made her knees weak. The police were here. She was safe. Two officers, a man and a woman, entered the house, their faces grim. They questioned Sarah about the phone calls, their expressions growing more serious with each detail she provided. One officer stayed with Sarah, while the other checked the rest of the house, their footsteps echoing through the silent rooms. The officer who had been checking the house returned, his face pale. He exchanged a worried glance with his partner.
We have a problem. The calls, they're coming from inside the house.
Terror seized Sarah, her breath catching in her throat. The calls were coming from inside the house? But how was that possible? She was alone. She had been alone the entire time. The female officer put a reassuring hand on Sarah's arm.
Don't worry, honey. We're going to get you out of here.
They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the silent house. Sarah followed closely behind, her heart pounding in her chest. As they reached the front door, the phone rang again, the shrill sound echoing through the house. Sarah didn't look back. She didn't want to know who was calling or why. She just wanted to get out of that house, away from the chilling calls and the terrifying unknown. She ran out into the night, the cool air stinging her lungs, but she didn't stop running until she was safe in the back of the police car. The house a distant nightmare in her rearview mirror.